Are you ready to learn the truth about what caused respectable gentlemen to flee in panic from the streets of London? This force had nothing to do with natural disasters or enemy armies. You can't even imagine the genuine terror these technological innovations instilled in conservative city dwellers. The 19th century brought humanity many discoveries, but one of them sent shockwaves through the British capital. Bulky mechanisms made of metal and wood suddenly disrupted the measured rhythm of the Victorian era, and people's reaction was quite unexpected. We've gathered unique details that lift the veil on this little studied chapter of history.
Look at the size of those gears.
Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how the clunky steam carriages forever changed the face of cities and forced society to rethink its views on progress.
Back, child, stay close to the wall. Watch where you're going.
What if I told you that everything you believed is a lie, and that the first automobiles did not inspire admiration among the public at all? In reality, these machines caused genuine terror among city dwellers. The first steam-powered carriages looked cumbersome and moved with a frightening clatter. Metal boilers constantly spewed clouds of thick black smoke. Londoners perceived these machines as something unnatural and hostile to their familiar world. Victorian fashion played a cruel joke on the first pedestrians trying to share the street with vehicles. Ladies wore voluminous dresses with long hems made of heavy fabrics. These outfits instantly collected soot and thick, oily mud flying from under the wheels of the vehicles. Men's frock, coats, and tall top hats were also quickly covered in a layer of gray ash. City dwellers were forced to constantly retreat to the walls of buildings to protect their expensive clothing from irreparable damage. The very architecture of London streets at that time proved completely unprepared for the advent of mechanical transport. Narrow alleys and winding cobblestone roads did not allow massive steam carriages to maneuver safely.
Guard the children, quickly.
Heavy wheels with metal rims inevitably destroyed the cobblestones, leaving deep ruts in their wake. Pedestrians had to struggle to navigate these damaged sections of the road. Every passage of such a vehicle became a test for the road surface. The speed of early vehicles, though objectively low, seemed frighteningly high to pedestrians. The cumbersome structure loomed over people with the inevitability of a locomotive. The lack of effective braking systems made it impossible to stop the vehicle quickly. The brake shoes clamped onto the metal wheels with a loud screech, but the stopping distance remained long. Pedestrians could not accurately judge the time needed to cross the road safely. Mechanical breakdowns occurred regularly, creating additional problems on the roads. Burst pipes spewed jets of hot steam directly onto the pavement. Detached parts of the structure remained lying on the cobblestones, obstructing the passage of other carriages. Repairing the machine took hours and required special tools. During this time, the broken machine completely blocked traffic in the narrow alleys. The appearance of this new mode of transportation sparked many rumors among the less educated segments of the population. This initial phase of getting to know automobiles became a real test for Victorian society. People were confronted with a technology that disrupted their familiar way of life and demanded new rules of conduct. Every trip turned into a challenge for both the driver and random passers-by. I'd love to hear your perspective on this, so please share your thoughts on the public's initial reaction in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on other historical explorations.
Mind your step, sir.
The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about is that traditional cab drivers saw the new vehicles as a direct threat to their livelihoods. For decades, the owners of wooden carriages and omnibuses had monopolized the city transportation sector. The emergence of self-propelled vehicles foreshadowed an inevitable decline in their income and a loss of influence. Carriage drivers deliberately created obstacles on the roads, blocking the passage of steam-powered vehicles. They refused to yield the right-of-way, provoking conflicts at narrow intersections. Traditional wooden carriages had a completely different dynamic of movement. The driver controlled the process using reins, relying on the rhythms of city life familiar to everyone. The machines, however, intruded into this space abruptly and noisily, disrupting the established order of traffic. The wheels of traditional carriages often got stuck in deep ruts, left by the heavy metal rims of the new vehicles. This infuriated the owners of the old vehicles and led to constant traffic jams. The lack of standardization meant that every new car was unique and unpredictable. Some models vented steam upward, while others directed exhaust fumes directly at sidewalk level.
Watch out, that vehicle's about to blow.
Now, however, they had to constantly look over their shoulders and listen for the clanking of machinery. A walk turned into a nerve-wracking activity, requiring the utmost concentration. Many residents stopped going out into the city unless absolutely necessary. The drivers of the first cars represented a completely new social group. They were mechanics and engineers, clad in dirty, oil-soaked work overalls. Their appearance stood in stark contrast to the formal suits of traditional London coachmen. City dwellers viewed these men as manual laborers, unworthy of respect or trust. The social divide between drivers and wealthy pedestrians exacerbated the conflict on the roads. London's soundscape underwent radical and irreversible changes. The familiar clatter of wheels was joined by the hissing of escaping steam and the clanging of metal parts. This mechanical noise penetrated through closed windows and disturbed the city dwellers' sleep. Property owners along busy streets began complaining en masse about the decline in the value of their homes. The urban environment was becoming increasingly less comfortable for permanent residents. Such chaos could not continue for long, and the public began to demand strict regulatory measures. The authorities faced the need to protect the citizens' familiar way of life from technological encroachment. The introduction of strict restrictions was only a matter of time. Do you think it was fair to restrict the development of a new industry for the sake of the peace of mind of cab drivers and pedestrians? In the next chapter, you will learn what incredible and absurd steps the government took to halt progress.
No, watch out. Stop.
The secret that would change the industry lies in a law that went down in history as the pinnacle of bureaucratic absurdity. In 1865, the British Parliament passed the famous Red Flag Act. The law required a crew of 3 people to operate a single vehicle. One person was at the steering levers, the second monitored the steam pressure in the boiler. The third crew member had to walk ahead of the vehicle at a distance of 60 yards. This person was required to carry a large red flag to warn others of the danger. Thus, mechanical transport was physically limited to the speed of a walking person.
It's so loud.
The speed limits were striking in their severity and complete mismatch with the technical capabilities of the vehicles. Within city limits, vehicles were prohibited from exceeding 2 miles per hour. Outside the city, the maximum speed was a mere 4 miles per hour. Steam-powered carriages, capable of moving much faster, were forced to trudge along behind their signalman. Drivers constantly monitored the valves to ensure they did not exceed this laughable limit. The on-foot signalman served not only as a visual warning to pedestrians. His duties included assisting the drivers of oncoming carriages when passing on narrow stretches of road. He had to use hand signals to indicate a safe path and ensure the vehicle did not get too close. In effect, this man served as both a living road sign and a traffic director. This job required immense patience and physical endurance in all weather conditions. The presence of a man with a flag created a rather comical yet humiliating scene for the inventors. A powerful metal machine obediently followed a slowly walking pedestrian. This spectacle drew crowds of onlookers who openly mocked the drivers and their clumsy contraptions. The engineers' pride suffered from such public humiliation of their technological achievements. The machine was perceived not as a marvel of progress, but as a dangerous and absurd contraption. The financial burden on car owners became practically unbearable. The law imposed enormous road tolls on self-propelled carriages, many times higher than the fees for light carriages. Maintaining a crew of 3 also required significant regular expenses. Owning a car had become an extremely expensive and pointless luxury. Most engineers were forced to abandon their designs due to a lack of buyers. The police strictly enforced every provision of the new law. Constables often set up speed traps with stopwatches, measuring the speed of passing vehicles. Even the slightest violation of the 2-mile-per-hour speed limit was punished with hefty fines. Drivers were under constant pressure and risked losing their property. The roads became a hostile environment for any motorized vehicle.
There are dangers we haven't seen in these parts for a long time.
The Red Flag Act had a devastating effect on design thinking. Engineers stopped working on improving speed performance and body aerodynamics. All efforts were directed toward creating bulky and heavy trucks for slow freight transport. Elegant passenger models disappeared from the drawing boards for many years. The country lost its leadership in the development of light and fast cars. Pedestrians gained a false sense of complete control over the situation on the roads. People got used to ignoring cars, knowing that they couldn't move faster than a walking pace. City dwellers strolled nonchalantly across the streets, right in front of the radiators of steaming boilers. Signalmen with red flags often became the targets of crude jokes from passers-by. This illusion of safety will play a cruel joke when speed limits are finally lifted.
That's the spirit, old man.
The bureaucratic machine proved its ability to effectively slow down technological progress in the name of maintaining public tranquility. The Red Flag Act became a symbol of fear of the unknown and a reluctance to adapt to change. An entire era of innovation was sacrificed to conservative beliefs. If you enjoyed this dive into the history of bureaucratic absurdities, be sure to like this video.
Make way there.
What the government doesn't want you to know is the scale of chaos that ensues when there are no uniform traffic rules. Before the advent of automobiles, London's streets operated on the basis of unspoken agreements and customs. There were no road markings, no signs, and no clearly designated pedestrian zones. Vehicles moved along any available path, yielding to others as the situation dictated. Massive machines completely destroyed this fragile system of mutual courtesy. Intersections were zones of constant risk and confusion. Due to poor visibility, drivers of steam-powered carriages could not spot carts approaching from the side in time. The lack of rear-view mirrors made it impossible to monitor the situation behind the vehicle. At narrow street intersections, deadlocks of interlocked wheels and bumpers regularly occurred. Resolving such situations was accompanied by loud arguments and cursing. Driving at night turned into a real lottery. The dim oil lamps mounted on the vehicles cast a faint light that barely illuminated a couple of meters ahead. Drivers were practically driving blind, navigating by the silhouettes of houses. Pedestrians could not spot the approaching dark mass of metal in time. Streets without gas lighting became high-risk zones. The lack of standardized turn signals led to constant collisions. Drivers tried to indicate their direction of travel with hand gestures, but in the dark or through clouds of steam, these were imperceptible. A vehicle could suddenly turn into an alley, cutting off pedestrians' path. The unpredictability of maneuvers forced pedestrians to keep a huge distance from any vehicle. Trust between road users was completely lost.
Get back, woman, get back.
Sidewalks, originally designed for pedestrian safety, ceased to be a reliable refuge. Massive steam-powered carriages often failed to negotiate turns and ran their heavy wheels over curbs. Stone slabs cracked and caved in under the immense weight of the vehicles. City dwellers walking on the sidewalk had to jump sharply out of the way. The sense of safety had vanished even from those areas that historically belonged exclusively to pedestrians. Drivers had no system of warning sounds. The familiar honks appeared much later, and early devices emitted only hissing and clanging. To warn onlookers, drivers had to shout loudly, drowning out the noise of their own engines. Amid the city noise, these shouts were often lost or misheard. The lack of communication between the driver and the street only added to the general chaos.
Mind the horse.
Police officers at intersections were completely helpless in the face of the new vehicles. Their hand signals, which were understood by the drivers of traditional carriages, were ignored by the drivers of steam-powered vehicles. The vehicle's braking distance did not allow it to stop precisely on the constable's command. Law enforcement officers were often forced to step out of the way of the heavy vehicles themselves. The rule of law on the roads seemed temporarily paralyzed.
Away! Watch out! Watch out! Control.
The streets of Victorian London had turned into a chaotic battlefield between the old ways and new technologies. The lack of rules exacerbated fear and distrust of mechanical transport. How long could society tolerate such lawlessness on its roads? In the next chapter, you will learn what role newspapers played in fueling this panic.
Read all about it.
Victorian-era newspapers quickly realized that fear sells more copies than any other news. Editors of London papers began deliberately stoking panic over the arrival of the first automobiles. Every breakdown or minor incident involving a car was described with incredible exaggeration. Journalists used the darkest epithets, calling automobiles mechanical monsters and iron demons. Readers received a daily dose of alarming stories about the inevitable dangers of progress. Articles were replete with detailed descriptions of the damage inflicted on city property. Newspapers published long lists of crushed greengrocers' baskets and broken fences. Particular emphasis was placed on the damage to expensive cobblestones and sidewalks caused by massive metal wheels. Cars were portrayed as ruthless destroyers of the cozy urban environment. This rhetoric resonated strongly with conservative-minded city dwellers. Journalists actively published letters from outraged readers. Respectable gentlemen complained about ruined suits and the inability to breathe easily due to acrid smoke. Ladies described their horror at the rumbling machines suddenly appearing from around the corner. Newspaper columns turned into a sort of complaint book, uniting opponents of new technologies. Public opinion was shaped by a constant stream of negative coverage. Cartoonists found an inexhaustible source of satire in automobiles. Popular magazines regularly featured drawings mocking drivers and their clumsy machines.
Stand back, the smoke's getting worse. Look out!
The vehicles were depicted as flame-spewing cauldrons chasing innocent civilians. Drivers were portrayed as mad scientists who had lost control of their inventions. Visual propaganda worked even more effectively, cementing the image of the enemy in people's minds. Newspapers often published fake interviews with experts predicting the imminent end of the automobile era. Pseudoscientists authoritatively declared that exhaust fumes were harmful to the human nervous system. Doctors warned of incurable diseases caused by the constant jolting of riding on a metal seat. These pseudoscientific articles sowed additional fears among anxious readers. The gullible public took any fabrication at face value. Particular attention was paid to coverage of court cases against car owners. Fines for speeding or violating the red light law were featured on the front pages. Journalists celebrated every time a court handed down a harsh sentence to a driver. This created the illusion of society's victory over dangerous disturbers of the peace. Readers felt they were part of a righteous judgment against progress. Editors skillfully played on the class conflicts of Victorian society. Early cars were incredibly expensive and belonged exclusively to wealthy aristocrats or major industrialists. Newspapers emphasized that the wealthy were entertaining themselves by endangering the lives of ordinary pedestrians. This sparked intense social hatred toward car owners. A technical issue quickly turned into a tool of class struggle. By the end of the 19th century, the press had built an impenetrable wall of rejection around the first automobiles. A massive information campaign made an objective perception of the new technologies impossible. Society was programmed to fear and be hostile toward any form of mechanical transportation.
Mind your step. Hurry
I
along
discovered
now,
this by
quickly.
chance while studying archival documents, but it turned out that the speed of automobiles frightened people even more than their appearance. The concept of speed in the 19th century differed greatly from the modern perception. People were accustomed to the leisurely pace of pedestrians and the measured rhythm of heavy carts. The appearance of an object capable of moving faster than human capabilities evoked a deep, irrational fear. Speed was perceived not as an advantage, but as an uncontrollable, demonic force. The physiological sensations of watching a fast-moving machine were unfamiliar to Londoners. A bulky machine suddenly accelerating on a straight stretch of road caused dizziness among those standing on the roadside. The human eye was not accustomed to tracking large metal objects changing their position so rapidly. This caused disorientation and a desire to immediately move as far away from the roadway as possible. Visual discomfort turned into physical malaise. Fear of speed was fueled by a complete lack of understanding of the laws of inertia. Pedestrians did not realize that a heavy vehicle requires a significant amount of time to come to a complete stop. People continued to cross the road in close proximity to a moving vehicle. They sincerely believed that the driver could stop a multi-ton vehicle instantly, simply by pressing the brake lever. This widespread misconception led to constant dangerous situations. The drivers of the first cars often became victims of their own intoxication with speed. The feeling of power over a powerful machine made them ignore safety rules and common sense. They would speed their vehicles down narrow streets, enjoying the headwind and the roar of the wheels. This recklessness provoked the justified anger of conservative townspeople who valued peace and quiet. Speed enthusiasts quickly gained a reputation as madmen and hooligans. Engineers of that era had not yet mastered the art of designing reliable suspension systems. Driving at high speeds was accompanied by terrible jolting and vibration throughout the entire vehicle body. Passengers risked serious spinal injuries if a wheel hit a pothole or a bump. This discomfort made long trips a real test of endurance. Fast travel was associated with physical suffering and pain. Aerodynamics was completely absent as a science in early automobiles. Square bodies created enormous air resistance while moving. Headwinds kicked up thick clouds of dust from the cobblestones, blinding the driver and passers-by. Small stones flew out from under the iron wheels, turning into dangerous projectiles. High speed turned the car into a constant threat to those around it. The braking systems consisted of primitive wooden or leather pads. When rubbing against metal rims at high speeds, they wore down quickly and lost their effectiveness. The smell of burning wood and leather accompanied every emergency stop. Drivers had to start braking hundreds of meters before an intersection or obstacle. The inability to stop the vehicle quickly made speed incredibly dangerous. The concept of a safe following distance was absent from the minds of road users. Traditional cars could travel close to one another without the risk of serious damage. Steam-powered vehicles required a vast amount of space for maneuvering and braking. Drivers often did not have time to react to an obstacle that suddenly stopped ahead. The impact of a multi-ton vehicle traveling at speed would smash wooden carts to pieces. The psychological barrier to speed was so great that some scientists proposed officially banning acceleration. They seriously claimed that traveling at speeds exceeding 20 miles per hour would cause respiratory arrest. These theories were widely circulated in popular literature, fueling widespread paranoia. People feared not only physical injury, but also mythical consequences for their health. Society actively resisted going beyond the familiar speed limits. The fear of speed became one of the main obstacles to the development of the automotive industry. Overcoming this irrational barrier required many years and large-scale educational campaigns. How did people manage to overcome their fear and accept the new reality? In the next chapter, we will examine how the gradual transformation of urban infrastructure took place. Gradually, engineers began to realize the need to adapt their machines to real urban conditions. Early bulky steam boilers were replaced by more compact and efficient engines. Gasoline internal combustion engines gradually began to replace steam engines. These new engines ran much more quietly and did not require huge supplies of water and coal. Cars began to shrink in size, making them better suited for narrow streets. The appearance of cars underwent radical changes to suit the tastes of the London public. Rough metal sheets were covered with elegant wooden panels coated in expensive varnish. Body designs began to mimic the shapes of the most expensive and prestigious carriages of the time. Soft leather seats and brass decorative elements added a touch of respectability to the vehicles. The automobile began to transform from an industrial machine into a symbol of luxury and status.
So grand.
A significant breakthrough occurred in the development of tires. Heavy all-metal rims, which damaged cobblestones, were replaced with solid rubber. This innovation drastically reduced noise levels when driving on stone pavements.
Very fine.
Body vibration decreased significantly, making the ride more comfortable for passengers. Cars were no longer perceived as rumbling destroyers of road surfaces. The advent of pneumatic tires was a true revolution in the automotive industry. Air-filled rubber tubes provided a smooth ride unlike anything seen before. They excellently absorbed shocks from potholes and road irregularities, protecting the car's mechanisms from damage. Travel speeds increased while comfort levels remained high. Pedestrians also appreciated the quietness with which the new cars rolled down the streets. Designers paid close attention to developing reliable braking systems. Drum brakes appeared on the wheels, capable of quickly stopping a heavy vehicle. Braking effectiveness no longer depended on weather conditions or the driver's physical strength. Braking distance was reduced several times over, which dramatically improved road safety. Pedestrians gradually began to regain a sense of confidence when crossing the street. Improvements in steering made cars more maneuverable and predictable. The stiff levers were replaced by the familiar round steering wheel. Drivers could now easily and precisely steer the car along the desired path. Cars learned to smoothly navigate the tight turns of London's side streets. The risk of accidentally hitting sidewalks and buildings decreased significantly. Exhaust mufflers solved the problem of unbearable noise and smoke emissions. A complex system of pipes and baffles reduced exhaust noise to an acceptable level. Cars stopped spewing clouds of acrid black smoke directly into the faces of passers-by. The air on London's streets became noticeably cleaner, and the smell of burnt oil ceased to bother city dwellers. The automobile became a relatively clean and quiet mode of transportation. Lighting systems also underwent a major upgrade. Dim oil lamps were replaced by powerful acetylene headlights that emitted a bright white light. Drivers could now see the road clearly far ahead during the dark hours of the night. The silhouette of a car became clearly visible to pedestrians from a great distance. Nighttime travel ceased to be a deadly gamble.
Look at the light.
The advent of enclosed bodies protected drivers and passengers from inclement weather and city grime. Glass windows and sturdy roofs created a cozy interior space, isolated from the outside environment. Ladies no longer had to worry about the safety of their elaborate outfits and hairstyles during the ride. The automobile became a full-fledged alternative to a comfortable carriage in any weather. This factor played a decisive role in changing high society's attitude toward cars. Step by step, technological progress stripped cars of their frightening features. Cars became quieter, safer, and more aesthetically appealing to a conservative public. Technology gradually overcame society's initial fear and distrust. The royal family and the upper aristocracy played an important role in popularizing automobiles. By the late 19th century, members of the royal family had begun to take an open interest in new technologies. They purchased luxury models and took ostentatious drives around London. The personal example set by the monarchs always served as a powerful signal to high society and ordinary townspeople alike. The automobile instantly transformed from a dubious contraption into a status symbol. Wealthy gentlemen began to form the first automobile clubs. These exclusive societies organized group drives and exhibitions of the latest models. Membership in such a club became a sign of belonging to a progressive and affluent elite. The clubs actively lobbied for motorists' interests in Parliament, demanding the repeal of outdated restrictions. The organized movement of car owners began to reshape the country's legislative landscape. Automobile exhibitions became the main social event of the London season. Huge halls were decorated with flowers and flags, creating an atmosphere of celebration and technical triumph. The public came to admire the gleaming lacquered bodies and listen to lectures by engineers. The exhibitions dispelled myths about the dangers of cars showcasing their beauty and complexity. People began to view automobiles as works of art and engineering genius.
Indeed, that's clever.
Gradually, rules of road etiquette for drivers began to take shape. Club members agreed to slow down when passing other road users. It became customary to stop immediately in the event of any unexpected situation on the road. Drivers began using special horns to politely warn pedestrians. These unspoken rules helped reduce tension on the capital streets.
I see it. Exactly. Observe.
The profession of chauffeur became a prestigious and well-paid job for many Londoners. Car owners hired experienced mechanics, dressed them in elegant livery and caps. A neat and polite chauffeur became the face of his employer on the city streets. The appearance of drivers ceased to be associated with dirty factory workers. This helped overcome the class-based rejection of motorized transport. High society women also began to master the art of driving. The appearance of ladies behind the wheel became a real sensation and finally shattered the stereotype of cars as rough and masculine. Models with lighter steering and elegant interiors were created specifically for women. Fashion magazines began publishing tips on choosing outfits for car rides. The automobile became a symbol of women's emancipation and independence.
The adventures we'll have. Careful, darling.
The emergence of the first driving schools helped foster a culture of safe driving. Experienced instructors taught beginners not only how to operate the controls, but also the rules of the road.
Left or right, like so. Now, you try.
Future drivers were taught to respect pedestrians and other vehicles. Graduates of these schools behaved much more calmly and confidently on the streets. Education became the key to integrating cars into the complex urban environment. The development of a network of repair shops and gas stations made car ownership convenient. Specialized garages appeared on the streets of London, where one could leave a car overnight. Owners no longer had to store fuel at home or repair their vehicles on the side of the road. The city's infrastructure began to slowly adapt to the needs of this new mode of transportation. Cars became an integral part of the urban landscape. Car manufacturers began to focus heavily on advertising their products. Colorful posters depicted happy families heading out for a picnic in a comfortable car. The ads emphasized the freedom of movement and time savings that the car offered. Fear of machinery was replaced by the desire to own a fashionable and practical mode of transportation. Marketing helped change the collective consciousness of city dwellers. The automobile finally won the battle for the minds of Victorians when it became associated with freedom. The ability to leave the city at any moment without being tied to a train schedule seemed like a fantasy. People appreciated the independence that personal, motorized transportation gave them.
We'll need to remove it to inspect the spring.
Pressure from automakers and the public forced Parliament to revise the outdated legislation. The Red Flag Act came to be seen as a national disgrace that was hindering economic development.
Read all about it.
In 1896, the long-awaited law on locomotives on the roads was passed. This document finally abolished the humiliating requirement for a flagman on foot carrying a red flag. The speed limit was officially raised to 14 miles per hour, marking a tremendous victory for progress.
Nothing else like it.
The repeal of the law was celebrated with a grand motorcade from London to Brighton. Dozens of cars paraded through the streets of the capital, greeted by thousands of enthusiastic spectators. This motorcade symbolized the beginning of a new era in the history of British transportation. People sincerely rejoiced at the liberation of cars from absurd bureaucratic shackles. Fear gave way to widespread enthusiasm and faith in the limitless possibilities of technology. The lifting of restrictions gave a powerful boost to the development of the domestic automotive industry. British engineers, previously constrained by strict legal frameworks, began actively introducing innovations. Dozens of new factories for the production of cars and components opened across the country. Competition forced manufacturers to lower prices and improve the quality of their products. Cars became more affordable for the middle class. London city authorities embarked on a large-scale reconstruction of the road infrastructure. Streets began to be paved with smooth, durable asphalt, ideal for rubber tires. Intersections were widened to ensure safe maneuvering of large vehicles. The first road signs appeared, warning drivers of hazardous sections of the road. the city began to physically adapt to the needs of motorists. The police received new instructions on traffic control. Constables underwent special training and learned to manage traffic flows at busy intersections. Strict rules regarding right-of-way and passing on narrow streets were introduced. Violators of the new rules were severely punished with fines which disciplined drivers. Long-awaited order began to take hold on the capital's roads.
Let them pass. To the right, follow the
The arrival of the first motorized omnibuses revolutionized London's public transportation system. Gasoline-powered buses proved to be significantly faster, cleaner, and more spacious than traditional horse-drawn carriages. City residents appreciated the comfort and speed of travel along the new routes. Public motorized transport allowed residents of the outskirts to get to work in the center faster. Vehicles began to serve the benefit of the entire urban community. Commercial companies began using trucks on a massive scale to deliver goods. Motorized vans allowed for the transport of large volumes of cargo in the shortest possible time. This significantly reduced logistics costs and stimulated the development of retail trade in the city. The streets were cleared of slow and cumbersome wooden carts carrying coal and groceries. London's economy received a powerful boost thanks to motorization. Medical and emergency services also recognized the advantages of fast vehicles. The advent of motorized ambulances allowed doctors to reach patients quickly. Fire crews using motorized vehicles were able to reach fire scenes faster, saving the lives and property of city residents. The automobile proved its absolute indispensability in emergency situations. Society was finally convinced of the incredible benefits of new technologies. Journalists radically changed the tone of their articles about cars. Now newspapers praised the power of the engines and the elegance of the bodies of the latest models. Articles described breathtaking car races and speed records. Journalists became the main promoters of technological progress among the public. The press played a key role in the final rehabilitation of automobiles. By the beginning of the 20th century, the automobile had firmly entered everyday life in Victorian London. The initial panic and fear of machinery now seemed like a ridiculous misunderstanding of the past. Society had fully adapted to the new speeds and rules of life on the roads. The history of the integration of the first automobiles into London's urban environment demonstrates a classic cycle of innovation adoption. The introduction of any radical technology inevitably provokes resistance and fear of the unknown. People tend to cling to familiar traditions and reject anything that disrupts their comfort. Victorian society demonstrated this reaction in its most vivid and uncompromising form. However, the force of progress always proves stronger than conservative prejudices. The journey from complete rejection to absolute acceptance took several difficult decades. During this time, automobiles underwent a colossal technical evolution, overcoming their major shortcomings. Engineers learned to make cars quiet, reliable, and safe for those around them. Body design evolved from crude metal boxes into works of art. Technical excellence became the main argument in the battle for public trust. Bureaucratic barriers such as the Red Flag Act only temporarily delayed the inevitable. Attempts to artificially slow down the development of the transportation sector were doomed to failure. Economic expediency and people's desire for freedom of movement broke down all legislative barriers. The repeal of absurd restrictions marked the triumph of common sense over political conservatism. The law is always forced to adapt to the realities of technological progress. The media played a dual role in this historical drama. At first, newspapers deliberately stoked panic by exploiting Londoners' primal fears of machinery. Later, realizing the inevitability of change, the press became the main mouthpiece of the automotive revolution. This example shows how easily the media can manipulate public opinion. The media landscape shapes society's attitude toward any technological innovation. The creation of the necessary infrastructure became a critical factor in the success of motorization. Paved roads, garages, and gas stations made driving convenient and safe. Urban space had to change to accommodate this new mode of transportation. Without these large-scale urban planning transformations, cars would have remained nothing more than an expensive and useless toy. Infrastructure always follows technology, cementing its status. The development of driving culture and traffic rules helped bring order to the chaos on the streets. People learned to interact with cars, anticipate their maneuvers, and maintain a safe distance. Drivers became aware of their responsibility toward pedestrians and other road users. Mutual respect and adherence to the law made the roads safe for all city residents. Cultural adaptation proved to be no less important than technical improvements to the cars. The automobile radically changed not only the streets, but also the very structure of society. It broke down spatial boundaries, allowing people to travel vast distances quickly. The car became a symbol of social status, independence, and personal success. Entire new industries emerged, creating thousands of jobs. Britain's economic and social landscape was transformed beyond recognition. Today, it is hard for us to imagine a world without the steady hum of engines and the rapid flow of traffic. We take the car for granted, completely forgetting its dramatic history. But every time we cross a busy intersection, we unconsciously follow rules born in an era of Victorian panic. The experiences of the first generations of London motorists laid the foundations of modern transport culture. Their mistakes and fears became the foundation of our comfort. Studying this historical process helps us better understand the nature of technological revolutions. Today, we are facing the emergence of complex digital algorithms and autonomous transportation systems. The reaction of modern society is in many ways reminiscent of the fears Victorian gentlemen had of steam engines. We are once again afraid of losing control over machines and losing our familiar way of life. The history of London's automobiles proves that this fear can be overcome.
Look at those infernal contraptions.
Motorized vehicles have permanently replaced wooden carriages on the streets of the world's capitals. Engineers managed to transform the rumbling, smoke-belching machines into safe and quiet modes of transportation. The panic of Victorian pedestrians in the face of oncoming radiators turned out to be merely a natural reaction to a sudden change in circumstances. People always find ways to tame complex machines by creating smooth roads and clear traffic rules for them. Fear dissipates as soon as a new design proves its practical usefulness in everyday life.
Watch your step, mind the wagon.
We have seen how the first automobiles traveled a long and difficult path from frightening metal monsters to a familiar mode of transportation. The fear, chaos, and bureaucratic obstacles of Victorian London could not stop the relentless march of engineering innovation.
Where you're going with that machine?
Do you think a similar story of panic will repeat itself with the mass adoption of flying cars or other revolutionary technologies? Share your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new in-depth dives into the history of progress.